that will cause your transmission to literally
explode.
Well, you guys asked for it, so of course, you guys get it. Well, a recent video about how to use paddle shifters in the Q50 specifically got a lot more attention and a lot more positive feedback than I was actually anticipating. And on top of that, I got additional follow-up questions as far as what not to do when using the paddle shifters. They would like some more specific details. So, great idea. Here's the video. Let's go for it. Number one, as I mentioned in the previous video, do not take your foot off of the accelerator while upshifting. The reason is, again, as I mentioned, that your transmission operates with a valve body which distributes hydraulic fluids under pressure in order to shift gear to gear. So if you are accelerating, you're pressurizing that hydraulic fluid with your foot on the throttle, and then you go to upshift. If you release your foot from the throttle at that same time, that hydraulic pressure diminishes, which makes your shift a lot less crisp, a lot less firm, and potentially, especially if you're under heavy load, if you're really accelerating and then you let off and your transmission is trying to go to make that hard shift, it doesn't have the pressures that are sufficient to make that gear shift smooth and potentially could cause wear. I'll try to demonstrate this for you here. We'll kind of get the RPM up, but I'm not going to go crazy because obviously I don't want to wreck my own transmission. So accelerate, take my foot off the gas. Ooh, see how slow that was, and the car even rocked a little bit. So we'll do it again. Foot off the gas. There's just a bit of a delay, and it just doesn't shift smooth, and it certainly does not shift firm. This is more of a concern when you are under heavy load, right? When you're at full throttle or even half or three-quarter throttle. It's not so much of a big deal if you're just, driving everyday normal driving situations. If I try to shift and I take my foot off the gas, shift, it's just really slow. But if you have that pedal mashed to the floor and you try to shift gears and you lift your foot at the same time, you're going to feel those RPM hang. It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be a crisp, smooth shift. Again, those RPMs are going to hang, and it's really counterproductive to what you're trying to go for, right? If you're at full throttle. When the car is under heavy load like that, you need to have that pressure in the valve body, those pressures in the valve body up. So the clutches get the proper pressure and the grips that they need in order to have smooth and crisp gear shifts between, from gear to gear. Number two, absolutely under no circumstances should you ever pull both paddles back at the same time. That will cause your transmission to literally explode. Okay, I'm just kidding. It actually doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything at all. For some cars, if you pull both of them back, that's actually what activates launch control. So, Ecutech, if you could make that happen in the Q50, that'd be pretty dope. Number three, do not cruise at low speeds in high gears. Now, this car, the Q50, most, I would say, on the market actually limit this. It doesn't allow you to upshift if you're going too slow. So we'll see here what the limit is. Okay, so I got it in third gear, 20 miles an hour. It lets us go into fourth, but it does not let us go into fifth. So it sort of limits us. It's sort of a layer of protection. You don't want to put undue stress or labor the engine. You don't want to be going too slow and have the car in too high of a gear. Think about it like as if you're riding a mountain bike, right? Or a 10-speed bike. You're pedaling fast in that first, second gear. Your feet are moving really fast, but your bike's not moving all that fast. Now imagine if you shifted all the way up to the highest gear, you put that chain on that big sprocket. It's going to take a lot of effort for you to turn that back tire. A lot of strain on your muscles and your legs, and it's just too much of a workout. It's the same exact thing for your car. It's just working too hard. Imagine doing that all the time. That's just too much stress. But then imagine if you're really going faster, you're going downhill, and now you got that chain up on that big gear. It's easy to turn the pedals, right? Because your wheels are moving. You have this momentum, so it's meant to be used at higher speeds. It's the same thing for the higher gears in your car as well. So on that same line, one thing that I would happen to add, which would be number 4 on the list, don't use those higher gears as passing gears either, especially 7th gear. There's no reason for it because it'd be slow. You'd be accelerating very, very slowly if you're trying to do that. But also it's just too much extra load, too much extra strain on your car's drivetrain. So again, don't use higher gears as passing gears. If you are on the interstate cruising in 7th gear at 70 mile an hour, don't floor it and try to go around people. Downshift to 6th or 5th potentially, and then accelerate and go around people, but don't use 7th gear as a passing gear. Number 5, you don't want to shift mid-turn. Now, if you're just driving normally, like everyday driving, it's not gonna matter. Like this, I can shift mid-turn, no big deal. But if you're taking this corner really fast and accelerating hard in it, especially if it's raining or there's snow on the ground, it's going to load your suspension. You know, you lose a little bit of momentum, so your suspension compresses, and then if you try to, then you hit a hard gear change, it could potentially cause your tires to break loose and you'll lose control. You see this all the time with the Mustang guys, right? As they turn corners, they have their wheels turned, they shift gear, and they lose control. And that's why they've earned the name of crowd killer. Devil, that's just a 6-cylinder. Number 6, do not short shift under heavy load. The other thing I mentioned in the previous video is that this car does not like half-assed shifts. This is particularly true in going from 3rd to 4th gear. It wants you to either be really, really accelerating hard or just cruising normally. Now, I'm not going to do it because I don't like the clunking feeling and I don't like how rough it feels in my own car. If you want to test it out, go ahead. But again, this is specifically for the gear change from 3rd to 4th. And it's under 3/4 or wide open throttle at about 4,000 RPM. The car does not like that at all. Again, it wants you to be pushing past the 4,000 RPM range or shifting really early. Number 7, do not downshift too early. Talked about in that previous video was that this car will downshift for you automatically as you decelerate. That's really cool and everything, and it makes it so you don't necessarily have to pay all that much attention if you're coming to a stop when you're in manual mode. However, if you're in a spirited driving situation, you definitely want to control your RPM, and you want to keep that RPM in your power band, in your power producing range, right? So downshifting is an important element to one of those racing or spirited driving situations. So you really just have to pay attention to where you're at in terms of mile per hour, as well as where you're at in RPM. Because I don't know that there's any safety feature built in here that protects you if you downshift at too high of an RPM. Because we know for certain, right, that 60 mile per hour is the very, very top end of 2nd gear on this Q50 with the 7-speed automatic. So you would definitely not want to downshift from 3rd gear to 2nd at, say, 70 mile an hour. That will put us way past the 7,500 RPM red line. So thinking about it from the 3rd gear standpoint, the very top end of 3rd gear is right around 90, 93 miles per hour, something like that. So again, you would not want to go from 4th to 3rd gear at 100 miles an hour. That would just be insane, and again, put you well past the 7,500 RPM red line. So here we'll just look at this so you get a little bit of an idea of how the RPM jumps when your vehicle rev matches for you. So we're at 40 mile an hour in 4th gear. Say we're coming into a curve and we want to keep our RPM up so we can accelerate hard out of it. Again, these cars are in our way, but we're going 40 miles an hour in 4th. We want to downshift to 3rd. That jumps us up to about 3,000 RPM. Again, we know 60 is the very top end of 2nd, so we can technically downshift to 2nd gear here. Let's do it. See that? It jumps us way up to 45. Now we're really in the power, but we're screaming. So that just gives you an idea of what the RPM does from gear to gear when you're downshifting. So again, you really want to pay attention to where you're at and get a feel for where your RPM needle is going to be when you downshift into a specific gear. A lot of people will talk about doing a 40 roll on the highway, you know, racing their buddies, and we'll do a video about this again because a lot of people want to do some more spirited driving, paddle shifting type situations. But if you're doing a 40 roll, you're starting in 2nd gear. Right? It gives you about 20 mile an hour before you have to shift again, so it'll keep you up in that power band. It'll keep you around that 4,000, 4,500 RPM, give you another 20 mile per hour, another couple thousand RPM, and then you can shift. So that's just something to think about. Again, very top end of second, 60 mile per hour. Very top end of third, 90, 92, 93 mile an hour, something like that. And it just continues up from there. So just really pay attention when you're downshifting, because again, I'm not going to test it, and I don't know if there's any safety features to prevent you from downshifting at too fast of speeds. Number 8, do not downshift to first gear. I remember learning to drive a stick. I think my dad told me that it's never necessary to downshift to first gear. That's just always been how I've approached it. I've heard some people say they downshift into first gear, but again, what's that, 20 mile an hour? You don't really ever need to downshift to first. The car would be absolutely screaming if you're in a mountain run or whatever. Again, no need to downshift to first unless you hit the stop sign, then you can downshift. But as long as the car is rolling, just don't go down to first. Number 9, do not shift back and forth from gear to gear unnecessarily. This is so dumb. Running through the gears is totally fine. That's normal, obviously, right? Our vehicles are built to shift sequentially from gear to gear. There's no problem. There's no problem in winding through the gears, on a long stretch. And, doing that on a regular basis. We all drive our cars every single day. The problem is, and the situation that I've come across actually in videos that has led to transmission failure in a Q50, was going back and forth, second to third, third to second, second to third, just constant back and forth shifting when it wasn't necessary. That's just undue, unnecessary strain on the 7-speed automatic. So the situation of the videos that I'm referring to, the guy was in the mountains and driving quite spiritedly, not using paddle shifters, just using the shifter here in the center. And as he was driving, he was just constantly hitting it back and forth and hitting it back and forth and down and up and down and up. Oh my God. So when I was talking about it in that last video, and again, we'll do a more spirited driving scenario video with the paddle shifters with some better angles so you can actually see what we're doing. In that scenario, it's just totally unnecessary to do so many gear changes unless you're in a completely built race car where you're expecting to wear out the transmission and other components. In your daily driver car, why would you want to put all that extra strain in your car? You're not racing anyone, and you're in a Q50, so you're not in a race car. You're not going super fast. You're just wanting to keep that your RPM in that power band, right? So if you're in second gear and you're able to wind that car out to 50 mile an hour, 50, 55 miles an hour in those corners, you're probably in too low of a gear. You want to upshift into third. That's going to keep your power band, pretty solid. It's going to keep your torque up and your horsepower up right around 3,000, 3,500 RPM, and you're going to be feeling just fine. And in some of those really tight corners, you can certainly downshift to second and accelerate out of it. But if you're shifting in every single curve, or you're constantly putting in second and winding it out, hitting third, hitting fourth for only a split second, and then coming back down to third, it's just too much. So that was the other part of it that I saw. He would be shifting up into fourth gear, and it'd only be for literally 1 second. So there's no point in that, in my opinion. Keep it in third, even if you're at the very, very top of third. Just let off. Just sacrifice a little bit of that additional mile per hour when you go into fourth and you get 2, 3, 4 mile per hour more. Just stay out of fourth, because you're going to be hitting that next corner, that next hairpin turn, and you're going to be coming back down anyway. So it saves an additional shift, because you'd be going from third into fourth and then back down to third and back down to second. So you might as well just stay in third and go back, to second gear and then back into third. And again, keeping it in third gear for a majority of the time. This is your daily driver, right? You're not racing anyone. You're not doing a time trial. You're not, on Pikes Peak rally race or anything. You're just having a spirited drive in the mountains. There's no sense in damaging your transmission for no reason. Well, I really, really hope this video was helpful, guys. It was sort of a part 2 to the paddle shifters, what not to do while using the paddle shifters in your Q50 or any other car, really, essentially. But stay tuned for more of these paddle shifter videos, because they're actually a lot of fun to make, and a lot of you had some additional questions. So probably the next one coming up here shortly will be a more spirited driving scenario and how I like to use the paddles. We'll see where we can go. If we just got to head up to some of the local twisty roads to do it, we'll do it. But that's coming up. Stick around, a lot more good videos. Appreciate the support, and we'll see you in the next one.